Hey everyone, DM here, and today I'll be talking about velvet. So velvet is a material that's really soft and plush to the touch, and it's used in many different things like furniture to chairs to sofas to curtains you see at home to curtains you see in the movie theaters or stages, and even in clothing like dresses to the card games you see at the casino, the card game tables you see at the casinos. So velvet is made through a process called a pile weave, which is where the fabric is made with loops in the surface and then basically cut using a really sharp utensil to create a really even surface of hair in a sense. So here's another illustration demonstrating that. So basically you can think of it as mowing down your lawn to create like that even layer of grass. So light reacts with velvet in a really interesting way. It basically gets absorbed through the fabric, and here is a really cute illustration demonstrating that process. It basically just goes through the fabric and gets absorbed, and that's because of how the fibers are arranged. So that's why velvet is used for a lot of things, like the backdrop for photography, where photographers want to get the light to get absorbed, and that's why it's used in stages so that it doesn't reflect off any of bright lights and basically blind the audience. So that's why you have this really matte texture with velvet instead of a really shiny luster with something like silk. And at certain angles, light will reflect off velvet, and it's whenever velvet basically bends or curls. So here is another illustration, and so as you can see, whenever there's a bend or a curl, the light will reflect off and bounce off, and it will show like these really cool highlights that you only get with velvet, as you can see right here and here. So now I'm going to talk about how velvet differs from silk and suede, just to get a clear understanding of how velvet looks. So basically silk reflects more light, so it's shinier in appearance, while velvet, it's kind of like matte with a little bit of bright highlights, like those sheens that I showed you. While suede, it's just very matte and it has a very low sheen. So here are some black and white images just to show you. So this is silk, and you can see how very shiny and lustrous it is compared to suede, which is very matte and there's basically not a lot of sheen. And here's velvet, where you can actually see there is some highlight, really bright highlights, and then some texture as well in those highlights. So there are many different types of velvet, and first up is silk. Silk is basically the very fancy version of velvet because it has a really nice drape, and there's a really nice apparent sheen that you don't really see in the cheap version of velvet, which is velour. And velour just has less of a sheen, doesn't drape as well, and it's basically more textury. Crushed velvet, on the other hand, is like the wrinkled version of velvet, and you can see that it has patches and like weird pattern textures on it. Mink basically is the very fur-like version of velvet. The fibers are longer than velvet, and it reflects a lot more light. Velveteen, these are the ones that are used at the card games at the casinos, have shorter fibers, and they barely reflect any light, or they do reflect, but at a very low rate. So now we're going to go into the good and bad examples of velvet. First up are the bad examples. So the reasons that I chose these as bad renderings is because this is way too smooth. Both of them are way too smooth. And velvet looks smooth, but if you look closely at it, there are areas where there are patches of texture and patches of dark areas and light. And it's basically not. And if you look at these good examples, you actually see that there are patches of light and darks, and they're not all smooth because there's like a multi-faceted surface even in velvet, and it's not extremely shiny. So I hope you learned a lot today, and thanks for watching my video, and have a great day.